Hello Unigame fans, the Steam Winter Sale means big savings on the best games, where the longer you watch this video, the bigger the discounts get. So let's begin with Nobody Saves the World, an action-adventure title from 2022 from Drinkbox Studios, developer of the Guacamelee Metroidvania series, where you play as the nondescript NPC character named Nobody, who finds a magic wand that allows him to take a variety of different forms, from rat to robot to horse and more, being able to mix and match abilities from the different characters to unlock and access new areas. The art style is gorgeous with funny writing, great enemy designs and engaging combat, and is one of the best games of that year. One of the most underrated pixel art Metroidvanias is Cathedral. Think if Shovel Knight was more Metroidvania instead of level based and you get some idea, in which you play as a classic sword wielding knight and explore this huge interconnected world. Of course, from the setting, enemy designs and visuals, you can certainly see games like Castlevania, Ghosts and Goblins, and even Wonder Boy in this game, and like those old school games, can be punishingly difficult, which has probably limited its wide appeal. But if you're up for it, 65% off and about $5 is worth a gamble in my opinion. This video is brought to you by MULLET MADJACK Cross ULTRAKILL Boss Rush Update, a free content drop for a fast-paced first-person shooter set in a world where humans and the internet have merged, and you need a dopamine hit every 10 seconds or you will die. Our hero is on a mission to rescue the world's most famous influencer from a dangerous criminal organization of powerful robot billionaires, shooting and hacking his way through an intense fast-paced action with roguelite style choice of upgrades after every level, resulting in some overpowered builds. The boss rush mode challenges you to defeat a series of bosses in the shortest amount of time to see where you stand in the global leaderboards, where this is one of the best games of 2024, so a crossover with the excellent ULTRAKILL is a stamp of approval, so if interested, buy the game with a 25% discount due to this update. Developer Roll7 was shut down in 2024, which was a shame since this was the Ollie people that might have grown a bit too large for their parent company Take-Two under their private division label, and to be fair, their two titles after the acquisition, while fun and interesting, probably did not bring in the massive numbers that the owners of GTA were interested in, but if you want to revisit their catalogue, Rollerdrome is a pretty neat one of these. It's an action arena title where you are zipping around on roller skates, pulling off sick moves like in a Tony Hawk game, but at the same time firing your guns at enemies. Just don't think too hard about the physics, it is worth a shot at 75% discount. One of the cleverest side-scrolling puzzle platformers is the Pedestrian, since it makes use of various street signs in the world as the core concept of this title. You play as the human in said signs, making your way through the world with some elements of puzzle platforming as you rearrange the rooms to get where you want to go, being very clever and worth a play. A relatively underrated farming sim title is APICO from 2022, a game that has you running an apiary raising bees instead of the more classic growing crops and raising chickens kind of game. The pixel art look is minimalist but well done, mixing the farm management aspect of expanding your operations and providing a comfortable home for the bees, with having to go out and explore to capture new bees to add to your hive. Also having a conservation element as you discover new bees and even crossbreed them, and is a very pleasant title. One of my favourite adventure platformer titles is Far Lone Sails, where that game played like a platformer, but for the most part you are platforming and climbing ladders within a vehicle to push buttons so that it can continue moving, with a hauntingly beautiful post-apocalyptic setting where the developer did make a sequel named Far Changing Tides as well. This is similar in concept, but with a different vehicle and takes place in a flooded environment instead, as a young boy sets out on a voyage to find a new home, being pretty emotional, which has to do with the swelling music, but I would highly recommend both of their games. There have been a number of post-apocalyptic CRPG that has a similar kind of setting and vibe to the Fallout games, in which UnderRail is another one of these, set in the distant future where the surface of the Earth has become inhospitable and what remains of humanity has retreated underground. The UnderRail is a vast system of interconnected metro stations, which, naturally, have become home bases for various factions to the point of becoming station states, where your character is caught among the power struggle among these factions. It has classic turn-based CRPG style combat with a bunch of systems and does have a lot of depth, but do be warned that it is not the friendliest of games and you might die a lot before getting the hang of it, being similar to Fallout 2 if you think about it, with 70% off, meaning that it's at a great price. A pretty underrated first-person roguelite dungeon crawler is Slash's Keep, a game that does have similarities to old-school PC titles but reimagined as a roguelite. Also, this is real-time with first-person combat as you explore procedurally generated levels and battle an array of enemies. Interestingly, there are secrets to uncover like switches and levers to pull to get access to treasure, as well as previously blocked areas, along with a crafting system for weapons where the environmental objects like traps do affect enemies as well, all wrapped up with a gorgeous comic book inspired art style and looks fantastic. There's something to the work of developer Mino Dev, who makes bullet hell inspired titles but isn't limited by the classic vertical or horizontal shoot 'em up style game design, since he made one of the best roguelites of 2024 in Rabbit and Steel, but is worth going back to their previous game Maiden and Spell as well. This is a 1v1 bullet hell title where you choose from one of 8 ladies to battle with your opponent, having PvP support, but also single player mode where you battle bosses, where 1v1 bullet hell isn't something that you would normally come across, so at 75% discount might be worth a try. When Bugsnax was first reviewed, a lot of people, including me, got excited at the possibility of a new Viva Pinata, so honestly, I was disappointed that this wasn't one, being more of a first-person adventure game where you are exploring the island, capturing these cute living snacks and feeding them to your friends, which, come to think about it, seems kind of disturbing as well, with the grander story of searching for an intrepid explorer that has gone missing. It is cute and strange and weird, which is to be expected since this is from the developer of Octodad. So if you want to discover an interesting story with fun mechanics, this is worth picking up. One of the best games that has not received any mainstream attention is Supraland, a first-person action-adventure title that is set to combine Portal, Zelda, and Metroid. Yes, this has some Metroidvania elements, like gaining abilities to access new areas along with platforming, puzzles, combat, and more, all from a first-person perspective. It is framed as being located within a child's literal sandbox as well, so you see versions of everyday objects represented in this game and is excellent, so at a whopping 79% discount, this is a true no-brainer. I believe Dem's Fighting Herds was at one point a My Little Pony fighting game, but due to Hasbro and IP issues, they had to change things just enough so that they wouldn't get sued. But essentially, it is the same thing in concept, a 1v1 competitive fighting game that stars 4-legged creatures. As compared to other fighting games, this has a much more limited roster at 8 characters, including DLC characters, where I believe design and balance has been finely tuned and is beloved in the indie fighting game community and has crossover with games like BlazBlue, Skullgirls, and Guilty Gear, so you can see that as an endorsement from them as well. An underrated monster taming RPG is Nexomon Extinction, one that of course follows in the footsteps of Pokemon, but does have their own take on the combat system, focused around an energy resource named ST rather than the PP system in Pokemon. As such, combat feels different and is a bit more strategic, also having 386 mons, and is a bit more serious than a Pokemon game since your child is an orphan but begins the story by leaving the orphanage by choosing a mon and exploring the world, and is quite a pretty title as well. Speaking of pretty titles, a gorgeous action platformer with Metroidvania elements is Iconoclasts, one of the best looking pixel art titles which does have great combat and an interesting setting. You play as an unlicensed mechanic in a world where this is illegal, since the powers that be frown upon that and will clamp down on it using faith as an excuse. The action is great, but does hide that there are quite a number of puzzles in this game, which largely have to do with wielding your oversized spanner to turn nuts, and while there are small-ish open-ended areas to explore, it is not exactly an interconnected world like in a Metroidvania, hence the distinction in genre, but still, it's a fantastic title that is worth it at full price, which makes 80% discounts an absolute steal. An older title worth a revisit is Apotheon, one that stands out since its art style is inspired by Greek pottery, and in a similar manner is drawing upon Greek mythology as well. You are ascending Mount Olympus to take the power of the gods for yourself in order to ensure mankind's survival. Combat is good, but honestly it is all art style, and structurally, while you do get movement abilities to progress, is fairly linear and level based, but still, for a game from 2015, it holds up well. Now this next title is interesting since It Lurks Below comes to us from David Brevik, who was at one point co-founder and president of Blizzard North, aka the Diablo people, who left Blizzard quite a while ago and set up an independent studio named Greybeard Games, with this title being their first and only release to date. One look at this game and you can of course see the Terraria influence here, but it does streamline the base building aspect and tries to focus more on the action as you delve deeper and deeper underground to find out exactly what kind of evil lurks below. There are 8 character classes to play as, but randomly generated levels and random stats on items, so it's very Diablo-like in that sense, but as a 2D platformer. And if you're skeptical about the idea, this is 85% off and is just $3, so why not give it a try. A slick looking title that is secretly one of the most successful games is Absolver, where developer Slow Clap is best known for Sifu at this point, but is worth going back to their melee focused, almost Souls-like combat title. The attacks in this game draw inspiration from classic martial arts and has a very interesting combat system, but the problem is that chunks of this game are dependent on the PvP aspect, which, as you might imagine for a game from 2017, can be problematic to find a match, where I don't think the work has been done to convert it into a solely single player experience, but still, what is here is probably worth the $3 or so. With Path of Exile 2 blowing up in popularity, there is a renewed interest in isometric action RPGs, but for a more classically designed one of these, instead of the more Souls-like influence on PoE 2, Grim Dawn is worth picking up. The base game is 80% off, and is definitely worth it, with the DLC being less discounted, but each does add a significant chunk of content. And if you're not in the know, the developer did announce another upcoming DLC, set to launch sometime in 2025, which is amazing to think about since the original game released in 2016, but such is modern game development, since as long as there is an audience, why not continue to support the game?
The king is dead.
An excellent grimdark action platformer is Tales of Iron, set in a brutal world that has been described as Redwall meets Game of Thrones, where you play as heir to the throne, but your father is brutally murdered by the Frog clan, where you need to regroup, rescue your brothers, and eventually take on the frogs once again. It's a brutal world where the defeated get eaten, with the art style and savage bosses being some of the highlights. Combat is deliberate, but stops just short of giving you a full-on stamina meter, even if dodge rolls and parry bashes need to be mastered. It does feature the voice of Geralt of Rivia as the narrator in this game, which adds to the vibes, where its sequel releases in January 2025, so get this if you have not. If you want a challenge, the pixel art boss rush title Eldest Souls will be worth picking up, in which you enter the Citadel to slay the old gods as the last hope of humanity. You wield a gigantic obsidian greatsword with the power to slay the divine, having a progression system in the form of talents and abilities that will allow you to customize your experience. This is just boss after boss, so the design comes in the form of the attacks and the arenas that you battle in, and post-launch, they did release the Depth of the Forgotten free expansion with 3 new bosses, so it's fantastic value at 90% off. Sure, the forest might be 6 coming to 7 years old at this point, and the sequel did just release out of early access in 2024, but yet, If you have not played this first-person survival title with cannibals, now's a pretty good time to pick it up. It's your classic first-person survival game where you are gathering resources and building your base, but have to build walls and traps to defend against not only cannibals, but also grotesque monsters that are made up from various human body parts stitched together. Still having an active community today, peaking at 87,000 concurrent players as of recording, and simply holds up. One of the cleverest asymmetric multiplayer experiences, which is kind of genius to think about, is Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, in which 2 or more players must work together to defuse a bomb. However, the catch is that only one player can actually see the bomb, but the other players have access to the manual, so it's a game about communication as the diffuser attempts to describe what they see to the rest of the players, and they have to frantically flip through the manual to find the relevant page and convey back instructions on how to defuse it. For greatest effect, print out a physical copy of the manual and schedule this for your next party with friends. Alright, here's a title that is more for my own personal curiosity, since for whatever reason I have Forward to the Sky on my Steam wishlist, a 3D action-adventure platformer that looks like a PS2 era game. So at 90% discount and it being under $1, it's time to just cross it off the list. Set in the ruins of a sky tower, the princess has to collect all the crystal pieces to reveal the story, looking like it has passable combat but has more to do with exploration and puzzle solving, but it's certainly a nostalgia play. Alright, these next 2 titles are 95% off, which I suppose are the impulse buy levels of discounts, with the survival horror title Tormented Souls being of interest here. It's a classic survival horror title inspired by Resident Evil and Alone in the Dark, where our protagonist investigates the disappearance of twin sisters in a mansion turned hospital. Now, why would someone do that? I don't know, other than to create the creepiest possible setting for a horror game, having the classic grotesque enemy designs, fixed camera angles, items to find, puzzles to solve, and more, and is worth a shot at this price. A sweet-looking space combat roguelite from 2017 is Everspace, a game which still holds up visually, that has you piloting your own ship, taking part in dogfights, but also finding loot and crafting equipment and upgrades for your ship. And while its sequel is much improved from the original, if you're curious about this series, this is a good place to jump in. Watch this video for the best games of 2024.